allora abbiamo visto le storie, i dati, chi interpreta le storie. La sfida è sempre passare dall'attenzione e trasformarla, no, in rilevanza ed efficacia. Da guarda me a resta con me a ti do un qualche tipo di rilevanza che ti possa essere utile anche nella vita. Nel mio piccolo l'ho provato con un progetto che abbiamo fatto con YouTube, con YouTube e il Quirinale, che si chiama Costituzione Shorts. Fondamentalmente ci hanno chiamato una serie di creators, c'era Gianluca Gazzoli, Matemagica, persone fantastiche, e ci hanno chiesto prova a interpretare un articolo della Costituzione per raccontarlo a un pubblico più giovane. Ognuno l'ha fatto con il suo stile su YouTube e la sfida era proprio quella: catturare l'attenzione di magari un pubblico più giovane, fargli interrogare sulla Costituzione e cercare di dargli rilevanza perché quella cosa gli potesse essere utile nella vita quotidiana. Questo è anche il senso: una volta che tu dai un qualche tipo di valore che una persona può essere nella vita quotidiana, hai vinto, che tu sia un brand, un creator o un'istituzione. Adesso proviamo proprio a capire come trasformare quell'attenzione in rilevanza, e lo facciamo con chi lavora ogni giorno sul confine tra brand e intrattenimento, che ci spiegherà un po' di cose. È co-founder e strategy partner di Small World, Dan Salkey.
Chi non intrattiene muore. That's all my Italian. Don't clap too soon. That's all I've got. I like you Italians, I'm a very eccentric and expressive person, so I'll try to go as slow as I can so that everything is understood. Yes, entertain or die. Hopefully, Beth has set up why we need to be more entertaining as brands, and my job now, hopefully through this presentation, is to give you a guide on how to do that, and that's through some of my clients, but equally through some amazing examples of brands out in the world today that are being entertaining. One thing that I'd ask everyone to have in their head while I'm talking is who you think the most entertaining brand in the world is to you today. Not an entertainment brand, like I know we have Netflix here today, but a brand whose sole products and service is not necessarily entertaining, but they themselves happen to be entertaining anyway. And hopefully you'll see some of these brands mentioned here. As you said, that brilliant introduction, I heard creator, brand, Dan Salkey, etc. So I won't go into this in too much detail, but I'm Dan, I'm the strategy partner at Small World. Essentially, we're a business that makes brands more entertaining by bringing creators as high upstream as possible to be creatives on briefs. But I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail afterwards. You'll see some of our clients there, like Duolingo, Oatly, Adidas, Hot Topic. Very lucky to work with them. So a little bit of upfront, I guess, on why the world is the way it is today and then why we need to be entertaining. Beth has done a great job on some of that already, but I think it's really important to understand that the media landscape is incredibly fragmented. In the 1960s, we had 3 television channels. Now in most countries, we have over 600. There are over 3.5 billion social media channels, which is an incredible number. And what that really means is that the line between advertising and entertainment has become forever blurred. When you, as a brand, are putting out your advertising, you're no longer really competing in a safe 3-minute ad slot with other brands like Mars and Mondelez. You are in this internet Royal Rumble with Mr. Beast, Netflix, Fortnite, A24, TikTok. These are your competitors, and when they are your competitors, the bar for what is deemed entertaining and what gets someone's attention is so much higher. But even if you can pay for someone's attention, what you could get 10 years ago cost far less. So for instance, in the last decade alone on Meta, CPMs have gone up 222%. So that means even if you are buying somebody's attention on digital platforms, and this is the case on other platforms too, I'm not just trying to single out Mr. Zuckerberg, but the sliver of someone's attention that you're buying is ever much smaller today. So realistically, we're agreeing that earning somebody's attention, and even if you are buying somebody's attention, being genuinely entertaining is the best way to guarantee that your spend is being used to the best of its ability. In other words, we really believe it is entertain or die. We also conducted our own research of a company called Tracksuit earlier this year, and we do this every single year. The research kind of sought to answer 3 questions. Who are the most entertaining brands in the world? What makes them so entertaining? And does that entertainment value drive revenue increase and business results? The spoiler alert is it does. These are the top 30 brands from our index in the last year, and we'll be running this again in March. Again, there'll be some brands here with smug smiles on their face, I'm sure, because they see their brands in this index. This is just the top 30. You can see the top 100 in the full research. What you will be able to see there, and it might be a bit difficult to see, but there is a little green number in each of those boxes. And what that is the revenue increase in the last year of those brands. Of the top 30 brands, 29 out of the 30 had revenue increase in the last year. 2/3 of the brands had double-digit revenue increase in the last year, proving that entertainment value and an entertainment-first strategy really does pay. And that was incredible for us to see. But what are they doing to be so entertaining? I guess this is the next question. You know, Beth, again, has really brilliantly set up the case that we need to be more entertaining and why we need to be more entertaining. It drives business results. But you know, where are you now in terms of activating that and putting that into action for all of your brands? So these are just some of the things that we do with our brands, but also other brands that I am a big admirer of across the world. And I want to start with this concept of small ideas, which does not mean small thinking. What it means is taking big brand ideas that build brands over years and breaking them up into small parts because of the media fragmented landscape that we live in today. So the old model of media is on the, I think it's on the left, you can see it there. But this was mass fame sustained by broad paid-for reach. This is buying advertising slots on the Super Bowl, on the Champions League final, those big moments where we know that the world is watching and we can capture as much attention as possible. The truth is, those moments have dwindled over the years. You know, we don't have these monoculture moments or as many of these monoculture moments that exist anymore. And equally, they're incredibly hard to buy, as we kind of talked about already. So the savvy brands that are changing their media model and understanding how to actually have their brand shared are the ones that are operating in this new model, fragmented fame, where they're able to have a big idea which can then be sent across the internet in what we call lots of littles. A really good example of this recently is a campaign by a business called Ramp. They did this activation you might have seen in New York. They put Kevin from The Office, the American Office, in a box, and they got him to do receipts. It was kind of a piece of performance art. It was a big idea in all of its rights. But the really brilliant thing about this, and if you just search Ramp into TikTok, for instance, you'll see this, the amount of videos that were recorded from other people experiencing this effectively like advert experience within New York, was that they paid creators strategically to come down and capture it from lots of different angles, lots of littles. And the effect that gave is that this thing was everywhere in New York for that particular day. An old brand model would have been filming a 3-minute film of that thing, putting it out as a TV ad or putting it out as a paid social advert through their organic channel and boosting it with paid spend and reaching far less people. So this is what we mean when we talk about small ideas. We mean coming up with an idea that does a big thing for the brand but can be split into lots of littles or as it says here, kind of we can incentivize the sharing of that idea far and wide, either because it is genuinely entertaining or there's an incentive to share that idea. This is probably the most important part in my deck, and I'll come back to it probably several times, but employing entertainers is something that I think is vital for making genuinely entertaining content. Again, seems like a no-brainer. Liquid Death is a brand that gets talked about to death on LinkedIn, I think. So I don't want to spend lots of time talking about their actual work. What I think is most interesting about them as a brand is how they actually operate internally. They have a left brain side of their business, which is filled of brilliant marketing people, CMOs, Dan Murphy, who I'm going to talk about later today. But the really interesting side of their business, I think, is where they have a creative studio filled with people who don't think about brands at all. This is Will Carsola. He used to work at Adult Swim, which is an animation studio famous for creating Rick and Morty, for instance, who lots of you might know. And he is the man who's behind the creative vision, the animation style for Liquid Death that's so very distinct and different to any brand in their category, but also globally in the world. So this is a great example of how you employ entertainers and you bring people like him as far up the creative process as possible. Similarly, we work with a lot of comedians. This is Serena Smart. She's an up-and-coming UK comedian, and she's led a writer's room on one of our clients called Rescue Remedy, which is a wellness brand targeted at Gen Z girls. And we create these kind of sitcom series on TikTok, of which she kind of leads the comedy writing for. And this is actually, I've stolen a graph from Beth, so I must give credit to System 1 and their research here. But this is because creators are king. The reason that they're so effective and why we want to bring them as close to the work that we do is because they are now the biggest builders of trust, better than anyone else. You can see on this graph there that these are all touch points or media touch points that brands will use. And at the far end there, you can see that the x-axis is brands that are better at building future demand. And you can see that creators are by and large the best at building future demand. And they're also not that bad actually at driving sales results as well. So they effectively have become the center of our media universe, or if brands are being successful, they should be the center of our media universe. So why not bring them and give them a seat at the table when we're making creative decisions as well? Building brand law. So I might get a slap on the wrist for this, but I think authenticity is a terrible marketing buzzword, and I hear it at most of the conferences that I go to, and I always cringe a little bit inside when I hear it. I think it is something that's come out of the kind of, I guess you could say, purpose-led marketing generation, and I think authenticity has become an excuse for brands to not lean into storytelling. And I guess what I mean by that is that marketing has always been about storytelling. It's always been about escapism, absurdism, selling somebody a dream. I mean, luxury is a great example of a category that is purely built on that concept. And I think the brands that are being most entertaining today, like our client Vacation Inc., which is a sunscreen brand in the US that is kind of steeped in the world of the 80s and has this kind of like nostalgia storytelling to them as a brand, or Duolingo as well, another client of ours who, again, have built and breathed life into this kind of green owl mascot. Those are the brands that are winning today, and they're the ones that are really leaning into storytelling. So, for instance, I think it's about kind of being respectful of our customers, right? When I watch Game of Thrones, I'm thoroughly entertained by it, but I know dragons aren't real. In the same way, when I watch a Duolingo ad and I see him chasing Dua Lipa, I'm not concerned for her safety. So I really would love anybody who's trying to be entertaining to lean into escapism, absurdism, brand law. Don't get caught up in this authenticity trap. The way that we actually put that into action with brands is we build these things called writers' rooms, so taking the very best of what Hollywood do and then putting that into a brand context, combining creatives and strategists from the advertising world with comedians, creators, showrunners, scriptwriters. And we get some really interesting results when we do that. So this is a TikTok-first sitcom, a vertical-first sitcom series that we created with Hot Topic, which is a clothing brand in the USA. And the reactions to it were phenomenal, just anecdotally. All of the comments on it were really amazing. We did it with 5 to 6 creators across the US. We put them into a writer's room setup, and then we kind of let their creativity flow, and then we shot it all around malls and stores in the US. But the amazing thing was when we ran a brand lift survey on it after the fact, not only did it drive key perceptions for Hot Topic, so that those green bars there are our content versus their regular content, which is in the purple bar. So, after people watched this content, they thought that Hot Topic created great social media content. They thought Hot Topic was more relatable. They thought Hot Topic was the edgy brand for pop culture merchandise. But more importantly, and I guess as Beth noted as well, like entertainment-first strategies don't just build brand perception, they do also drive call to action. People are much more likely to want to go and visit a Hot Topic store after seeing this content that was filmed in malls, filmed around their stores. They're much more likely to go and visit Hot Topic online. They're much more likely to tell somebody about Hot Topic within their friend group or their family group. So this was really, really impressive and surprising for me to see as well. And we're going to continue doing these kind of tests on all of our work as they come out. Next, committing to the bit. I couldn't get through a presentation without at least one mention of AI. I know we've already had it come up a couple of times. But I think the interesting thing to talk about in the context of AI is not really how AI is coming for our jobs, but how I think AI is at risk of making everything more boring. Because AI allows us to create easier than ever, it also makes us think that anything can be created with AI effectively. So the things that actually genuinely stand out today aren't really these amazing graphical concepts or pieces of cinematography even. The things that I think stand out are the things that show real human effort. For instance, you'll see behind the scenes content does even better than the regular content now these days because it shows the kind of real human effort that went into creating something. And similarly, that's what we try to do with our client Oatly. So we do these things called, people call them narrative objects or 3D comedy, but things that you physically go out, make, buy. I think the ramp example is a good example of that as well, a physical experience, which ironically is some of the best strategy for something that works well on social. And the reason I think for that is because it shows a massive amount of high effort in a low stakes environment. The higher the effort that you can put in a place where people aren't expecting it, the more likely they are to want to share that with their friends, the more likely it is to stand out in an environment where it shouldn't necessarily stand out. So yeah, this is an example from our client Oatly. They gave us a task to promote their new ready-to-drink matcha. Most influencer agencies, for instance, would just seed it out to food influencers with a hashtag ad next to it holding the product. What we did instead was, off the back of the matcha crisis, we created this break in case of emergency glass case, which we seeded out to lots of fashion influencers, and it became this kind of like must-have fashion piece, which was very widely shared. I'll talk about in a second. But I think the perfect example of this actually is a brand called Red Bull, who I'm sure we're all familiar with. They've been committing to the bit for decades, and this was obviously launching Felix Baumgartner from the Stratus, which is a real commitment to showing people, not telling people, that they're an entertaining, exciting, adventurous brand. Okay, moving into the last couple sections of my presentation. Measure what matters. I think, we talked about this a lot today. I think in the context of entertainment, we really need to reframe what we're measuring. I don't think the impression is that impressive anymore, but I don't want you to take it from me. I want you to listen to Dan Murphy, who is the CMO of Liquid Death.
You can buy a few likes, or maybe you can buy some views, but the real things you should look for: how many people are saving it and sharing it when you push it out to social? Is press really writing about it? Is it breaking through to places you can't get with a PR firm? With the content we can put out to 12 million people, we look at that ratio. You can't always look at views because the social platforms will suppress, and occasionally we'll put content in there that gets algorithmically flagged. They think it's horror or death or something, because it often is. And so we don't go. But we're like, okay, there's a piece of content here that we were getting good signal from our audience of 12 million. Now let's exclude that audience with a teeny amount of boost. I'm talking $5,000. Push that out to non-Liquid Death folks, see if the ratio holds or even gets better. Now we can elevate that to an ad-expected environment, like a YouTube pre-roll. Are they hitting smash in 5 seconds when the skip button appears? Are they watching all the way through? Then we know this has broad appeal that we can elevate to a CTV. And my God, does Liquid Death stand out in between an insurance ad and some truck ad? And we get tweets like, how did this get on TV?
So what Dan's really saying there is that reach and impressions aren't necessarily the metrics they look to for success. It's things like saves and shares, genuine engagement, that are signals of influence. And that's why we use something called the entertainment funnel at Small World to track the success of some of our campaigns. You're really trying to move someone from being exposed to content, which doesn't really mean much, an impression, all the way through to saving and sharing something, which is a signal of word of mouth. And that should be the ratio that you look at that decides how much spend you should put behind some of your initiatives. For instance, the matcha case that I just talked about before had a really incredible likes to shares ratio. So for every 2 people that liked the content, 1 of them was sharing it with their friends, which is 50 times higher than any of the average posts on a platform like Instagram. So genuinely, I think that we should be reframing how we're looking at content and how content's being shared. And then very quickly, very lastly, because I know I'm over time already, I just want to give you a sneak peek at a new piece of research that we're bringing out next year. So one of the things that people talked to us about and said, they looked at that top 30 brands and they said, but all of these brands are really funny. My brand isn't funny. Duolingo's funny. Liquid Death is funny. My brand's not funny. And I kind of took a bit of offense to that, because I said, well, there's tons of entertainment out in the world that isn't humor. There's anime, there's action adventure, drama, fantasy, horror. But instead of getting annoyed about it, we said, okay, why don't we actually put this to the test? Let's ask people, 20,000 of them across the US, which genres they find the most entertaining. And let's see where comedy lands and if comedy comes out on top. And then let's use that as a case for brands to invest in other genres of entertainment rather than just relying on comedy. And just one slide, but one of the really interesting things that we've seen for Gen Z, so 18 to 34-year-olds, which again, I expect most of you in this room will be targeting in some way, shape, or form, comedy wasn't even anywhere near the top 5. The things that were really coming out on top were things like horror, anime, fantasy. And this actually correlates with some of the most entertaining brands in our index. You can see that they're already starting to lean into some of these genres, like Duolingo in anime, McDonald's in anime, Airheads in horror, which I think is actually a really, really interesting one to look into. So this is just a little flavor of some of that research we're going to be launching next year. But it shows that not only does entertainment pay, but lots of different forms of entertainment pays. And lastly, here's my nice shiny QR code for a bit of salesmanship, as Beth would call it. Feel free to download the report. We're going to be releasing number 3 in March of next year. And thank you very much for having me. And remember, entertain or die.